Picture this: a figure woven from moonlight and moving shadow. It flows across impossible distances, a whisper against the night, untouchable and lethal. It is the ninja of our collective dream, a master of esoteric arts, a phantom of perfect agency, a superhero carved from the romantic darkness of feudal Japan. Now, let us dismantle that dream with the weight of history. The truth is not a figure in seamless black, but a form in stained, homespun cloth, the color of mud and dried blood. It does not soar, it crouches. It does not command the elements, it shivers in the mountain rain of eager province, hollow-cheeked from a hunger that is its oldest companion. This is the shinobi, and its world was not one of power, but of profound, institutionalized suffering. The word itself offers the first clue: shinobu, to endure, to steal away, to bear a sorrow so deep it becomes one's identity. Forget the cinematic spectacle. Envision instead the first lesson. You are not taught to fly, but to fall. You are thrown, again and again, onto river stones until your bones learn a terrible flexibility and your skin forgets how to scream. Your training is not in wielding a sword, but in holding a single position for so long that birds mistake you for a gnarled tree root. This is the foundational agony, the systematic unmaking of a human being's instinct to flinch, to protest, to seek comfort. This is the gateway into the broken world. What awaits on the other side is not a path to glory, but a descent into a specific and chilling form of despair. We begin not with their legendary deeds, but with the inescapable prison that forged them. For to understand why you would not survive, you must first understand the cage from which they could never truly escape. This relentless conditioning served a singular, grim purpose: to forge a tool that could operate in the spaces honorable men refused to acknowledge. You were being sculpted into a living secret, a deniable instrument. But before the first lesson in silence, you were already imprisoned. Your cage was not made of iron, but of blood and station. Picture the feudal landscape, a pyramid rigid as stone, crowned by the samurai. His was a world of luminous, unbearable honor, of polished lacquer armor, of poetry, and the perfect, singular death. Beneath him churned the vast, silent engine of society, the peasant, the artisan, the merchant. Theirs was a life of tax, toil, and deference. Now look further, to the remote mist-shrouded valleys of Iga and Koga. Here, the soil was poor, and the reach of distant lords weak. Here, communities survived through a grim, self-reliant autonomy. And here, a desperate calculus took root. A samurai army was a luxury of the rich. For a minor lord with ambitions larger than his treasury, victory required a different currency: terror, deception, and patience. Acts that would stain a warrior's soul were merely business for the forgotten. Thus, a bargain was struck with the damned. The mountain villages would provide a unique commodity: human beings trained in the arts of subversion. In return, they received a fragile protection and a measure of barren self-rule. This was not a calling. It was a form of indentured survival. You did not choose the shadow. The shadow was the only patch of ground left for you to stand upon. Born into this arrangement, you inherited a paradox. You were both vital and vile. Your skills were purchased in secret, yet you were openly despised as kanja. A spy, a word hissed with contempt. The society you were tasked to protect viewed you as a spiritual contaminant, a necessary evil to be scrubbed away when the work was done. Your existence was a permanent, silent scream in the gap between need and honor. You were the blade that must never be acknowledged, wielded by a hand that must never be seen. And so, you were handed your tools, not the legendary armory of myth, but the pathetic, brutal poetry of the desperate. Forget the gleaming stars and the unbreakable swords of legend. The shinobi's true arsenal was a testament to scarcity, a collection of brutal improvisations. Picture, if you will, not a velvet-lined case of specialized instruments, but a farmer's satchel, its contents speaking of a world with no room for splendor. The iconic shuriken was not a crafted weapon of precision, but a handful of desperation. They were the metal detritus of a poor life. Broken nails salvaged from planks, sharpened washers, the twisted remains of a cooking knife ground down to a bitter point. Their purpose was not death from a distance, but a moment's chaos, clattering against a stone wall to turn a guard's head, or hurled at the legs of a pursuing dog. They were a diversion, a disposable whisper of violence. The kunai, that dagger of 1,000 theatrical flourishes, was in its soul a humble trowel. Its broad, flat blade was for digging, prying loose a wall stone, chipping a handhold into plaster, or hollowing out a damp refuge in the earth. To use it in combat was to risk losing your primary tool for survival. It was the implement that carved your hiding place, not your glory. Your most vital gear was the cloak upon your back, often woven from coarse, water-resistant hemp or horsehair. It was camouflage, bedding, and in dire straits, a makeshift sack or a drag shroud. Your rope was not a silken cord, but a rugged functional thing of hemp, as likely to be used for hauling a sack of stolen grain as for scaling a wall. This was the arsenal of the invisible. Every item served multiple, mundane purposes. A small sickle, kama, was for cutting rope, harvesting reeds for camouflage, or severing a tendon in the shocking intimacy of a close-quarters grapple. Pepper dust carried to blind, not to poison. The philosophy was one of ruthless utility and absolute deniability. If searched, you were not a warrior, but a peasant with suspiciously adaptive tools, a story that often ended as badly as being caught with a sword. You wielded the poetry of poverty, where every object whispered of a life spent on the jagged edge of want. Thus, armed with the tools of a peasant, you were sent into the abyss of your purpose, the mission. In the grand myth, this is the climax, a lightning strike of vengeance in the heart of a guarded castle. The reality was a slow, suffocating, and profoundly unclean ordeal. Picture this not as an infiltration, but as a dissolution. Your task is not to defeat a lord, but to become a rumour, a bad smell, a persistent drip of water in the enemy's foundations. You are to be a ghost, long before you are ever a threat. Your point of entry is never the fortified gate or the graceful roof. It is the castle's bowels. You will spend hours submerged in the icy, putrid flow of a sewage channel, waiting for the night soil gate to be unbarred. Your world narrows to the feel of slime on stone, the choking stench, the skittering of rats over your submerged hands. You enter the fortress not as a conquering shadow, but as a creature emerging from filth. Your very presence an act of profound defilement. Espionage is not overhearing a single war council. It is a marathon of degradation. You may be tasked to pose as a leper for months on end, sitting at the same city gate, your skin painted with horrifying sores, your voice a practiced rasp. You will beg, you will be spat upon, you will be ignored, all to observe the single, mundane detail that matters. Which guard drinks alone every night, which merchant's cart is never searched. The skill is not combat, but the absolute erasure of your own pride, the monumental patience of the utterly forgotten. And when the order for assassination comes, it is never a duel. It is epidemiology. Your weapon is a tainted well. Your target is not a man, but a garrison's health. You are to sow dysentery, or perhaps, if the wind is right and your conscience is sufficiently silenced, to introduce the weeping sores of smallpox via a gifted blanket. You are not a warrior. You are a vector of despair. The mission is a descent not only into physical filth, but into a moral void where the very concept of a target dissolves into the suffering of the many. It is work that stains the soul, demanding a psyche that has already made peace with its own annihilation. To execute such work required more than a broken body. It demanded a dismantled mind. The final and most critical forging was not of muscle, but of psyche. You were to become a vessel, empty, resonant, and capable of being filled with any identity, any purpose, and then emptied again without a trace. This began with a pervasive, chilling pedagogy of paranoia. Your own clan was your first and most diligent interrogator. Loyalty was not assumed, it was tortuously proven. A fellow trainee, a friend you broke bread with, might casually mention a rumor of the daimyo's displeasure with your village. This was a test. Your reaction, a nervous glance, a hurried question, would be noted. The friend might disappear the next day. A lesson written not in words, but in absence. You learned that trust was the most fatal luxury. The world became a labyrinth of potential traps, where every glance and gesture required forensic analysis. Isolation was your new ecology. You were severed from the stable anchors of a past self. Names were shed like old skins. Your birth name, your clan name, replaced by operational aliases as temporary as the mission. You practiced the dissolution of your own memories, meditating not on peace, but on oblivion. The goal was to create a void within, a silent chamber where the echoes of your former life could not reach. You were sculpting your own ghost. And then, you were given your most profound tool, the Fukiabari, the suicide pill. Often a hollow tooth or a lacquered capsule containing the violent piece of wolf's bane or nightshade. Its presentation was a rite more solemn than any oath. This wasn't merely an instrument of escape. It was the physical manifestation of your disposability, the ultimate symbol of your clan's cold calculus. It sat in your mouth, a tiny, weighty coffin, a constant taste of your own mortality. It whispered a terrible equation. Your life was worth less than the secrets you held. Your final, most definitive act of service would be your own erasure. With this, the forging was complete. You were now a hollow man, a weaponized phantom bearing the instrument of its own dissolution. This meticulous unmaking of a human being, this reduction to a hollow, poison-carrying instrument, culminated in a final, institutionalized cruelty. The greatest peril you faced was not the enemy's arrow or the castle's dungeon. It was the meticulous, pre-planned abandonment by the very hand that wielded you. Picture the moment of capture. The struggle is over. You are in the grip of the enemy guard, your tools confiscated. Yet, in that dizzying descent into panic, a single, stubborn ember of hope still glows. The clan. They will negotiate. They will ransom. They will mount a rescue. They must. You cling to this fiction through the first blows of the interrogation, through the long, dark hours in the cell. Your silence is not just training. It is an investment in your eventual redemption. But your clan's protocols were etched in ice, not fire. The moment your capture was confirmed, a silent mechanism engaged. Messengers were dispatched not to plan a rescue, but to deliver a script. To the enemy lord, your clan's representatives would offer polite, baffled denials. This person you hold, we have no record of such a man. His name is not in our registers. He must be a rogue, a bandit, a fantasist. Your existence was formally, bureaucratically vaporized. Back in your village, your family would be summoned. They were not told you were a captive. They were told you were dead. A swift, unremarkable death, a fever, a fall. A small symbolic funeral might even be held over an empty grave. Your mother's grief was real, but its object was a lie. You were mourned as a memory while you still drew breath in a cell miles away, choking on the dust of your own obliteration. This was the masterstroke of the system. It transformed your inevitable failure from a political liability into a solved problem. You were not a captured asset. You were a statistical inevitability, already accounted for and written off. The ultimate terror was not the pain inflicted by the enemy, but the yawning silence from the mountains of Iga, a silence that confirmed your worst, unthinkable suspicion. You had not just risked your life for your clan, you had sacrificed your very reality to them, and in return, they had surrendered you to the void. The killing pill in your mouth was no longer just an option, it was the only belonging you had left. What then became of a system built upon such exquisite cruelty? The shinobi did not vanish in a climactic battle or a grand revelation of their secrets. They were made obsolete by the most mundane force of all, peace. Picture the slow dawn of the Tokugawa era. After generations of civil war, a rigid, enforced stability descended upon Japan. The great samurai lords, now bureaucrats in a vast, quiet castle, had less need for the knife in the dark. The market for sabotage and terror dwindled. The shinobi, a creature born of conflict's fertile shadows, found itself blinking in the harsh, unyielding light of a new order. Some simply returned to the earth from which they came. They laid down their kunai and took up the farmer's hoe once more, their legendary skills atrophying into half-remembered tricks for fixing a fence or catching a rabbit. The hands that once calibrated the tension on a grappling hook now measured seed grain. The mind trained to track the patterns of a castle guard now calculated the yield of a rice paddy. They were ghosts attempting to re-inhabit their own forgotten bodies, living testaments to a fading nightmare. Others performed a more tragic alchemy. They commodified their own mystique. The very arts of deception and infiltration, once the desperate currency of survival, were repackaged as theatre. Shinobi families, their traditional income severed, became troops of performers. They staged spectacular acrobatic displays, pretending to scale walls and vanish in puffs of smoke for the amusement of crowds at festivals. The meticulous, soul-deadening craft of building a false identity became a carnival act. The ultimate disguise, they discovered, was that of the very caricature the world had always believed them to be, a harmless, thrilling fiction. In this transformation lies a profound and unsettling truth. The shinobi's legacy is not a manual of secret techniques passed down in hidden scrolls. It is a psychological scar. It is the demonstration of how completely a human being can be instrumentalized, how hope, loyalty, and the very instinct for self-preservation can be systematically inverted into tools of control. They stand as eternal counterpoints to the samurai's luminous bushido, proof that honor is a luxury, and that in the darkness beneath the floorboards of history, survival often wears the face of moral annihilation. Picture this final, quiet truth. The shinobi was never a master of darkness. He was its prisoner. His legacy is not a scroll of secret techniques, but a chilling blueprint, a map of how to unmake a person. It is a story written not in ink, but in the negative space where honor, compassion, and hope used to reside. We are drawn to the myth because it is a fantasy of ultimate agency, the lone individual who, through sheer skill, transcends the system. The truth of the shinobi reveals the opposite, the individual utterly consumed by the system. He is the ultimate product of a world where human beings could be rendered into tools, where loyalty was weaponized into betrayal, and where the final act of service was your own annihilation. He is not the shadow that moves freely. He is the shadow permanently cast by the harsh, unforgiving light of feudal necessity. This is why you would not have survived. It was not the cold, the hunger, or even the terror of the mission. It was the systematic erosion of everything that constitutes a self. You would have broken not on the rack of an enemy, but on the chilling efficiency of your own clan's logic. You would have shattered upon the realization that you were not a person serving a cause, but a living, breathing expenditure, pre-calculated and already written off. The ghost of the shinobi does not haunt our castles. It haunts our mirrors. It asks us the most uncomfortable question: what are we, in our own modern systems, willing to endure? What parts of ourselves are we prepared to silence, to abandon, or to sell for a measure of security or a sense of purpose? In an age of digital footprints and algorithmic loyalties, the shinobi's world of erased identity and total disposability feels less like a distant horror and more like a cautionary whisper from a past that understands our future all too well. He endures, not as a legend of power, but as a monument to the human capacity to bear the unbearable. His story is not an inspiration. It is a warning etched in the old cold bones of the mountains. A warning that the most terrifying prison is not one made of stone, but one made of choices that are not your own. The shadow remains, not as a power to be wielded, but as a reflection to be recognized, and perhaps feared. The shinobi's existence was a closed loop of suffering, betrayal, and erasure. Having seen the full arc of their broken world, what lingers with you most? Is it the physical horror, the psychological dismantling, or the chilling institutional betrayal? Share your final reflection in the comments below. If these journeys into history's darkest corners resonate with you, subscribe. The shadows are deep, and many more stories await.